we will still have wars. People have self-interest. They have strategic interest, domestic, resource interest, and so what have you. However, the question is, whose interests are we talking about? The interests of the king or queen? They don't care about public opinion. They don't take polls. They just go and wage wars. Now, with the democracy, it's much more difficult. You have this raging debate in the newspapers. You see mothers coming on TV crying about their child that died in the last war. To go to war for a democracy takes a lot of work. But that all is a good thing. Because once a democracy decides to go to war, it's full blast. But you have the will of the people behind it.
Now, let me ask you one more question about democracy and technology. And I think the two have actually something in common in a sense that they create this artificial sense of agency. And take my iPad, for example. It gives me the impression of control. I think I can use whatever I want with it, but the problem is, of course, that I cannot change the operating system. I can only download the applications that have already been created for me. And I think democracy is a bit similar in that regard, that people believe that they have all the controls at their disposal, but some of those controls seem to be artificial. So I guess what I'm saying is that this, both democracy and technology can numb your sense of agency.
Let me ask you a question. Name a better system that has withstood the long period of time, that has given people prosperity, given people peace. Give me the name of another system that is better.
I'm not arguing against democracy. I'm arguing against the appearance of democracy, which I think exists in many of the Western countries.
There's no such thing as a perfect democracy. The Greeks did not have a perfect democracy. They had slaves, for God's sake, when democracy was first created.
Well, I think it's a very American argument, but for many people...
I think it's not American. It is the argument.
Well, I don't want to get into an argument with you, but I think it is problematic for many people.
But that's what democracy is all about. Democracy is about sharpening two points of view and let the best argument win, rather than saying, I'm the king, off with your head.
But okay, let me sharpen my point. George W. Bush was a democratically elected president. Obviously, as you said, he had some consultations about that war, but that war was launched under a false pretext. The democratic procedure that exists there in the United States, consultations with the Congress, because the Congress wasn't consulted back then, so the democratic procedure wasn't really explored.
I think what you're saying
didn't have a chance to actually deliver their judgment.
The very fact that you can actually say these things is a testament to the fact that the world has come a long ways from the days of the czars and the kings and the queens. You'd be put in prison for saying a fraction of the things that you just said.
But I wonder why is it that freedom of speech is considered to be the domain of Western democracies? Freedom of speech, freedom of science, freedom of exploration existed in a non-democratic world as well. It did not exist.
Name me a country throughout history, human history, that had freedom of speech, freedom of science, freedom of religion. Name me that country.
To a limited extent, a lot of them.
You can't,
China,
because there is
Russia.
none.
Well, freedom of science.
I don't think so. If you disobey the emperor, off with your head.
Again, challenging the democratic system could be also very detrimental, and I would like to get your opinion on this IT vigilantism that we've seen over the past few years, whistleblowers in the United States who blow the whistle on the American system because they believe that
Which I think is a good thing. I mean, the very fact that they can go out there rather than being assassinated is a testament to democracy.
Isn't that also a case that democracies want to impose that point of view on everybody else? Because
what point of view does a democracy want to impose
democratic
on everybody else?
Way of governance, and we've seen a lot of very bloody
democracy wants to
examples
promote democracy, but democracy does not promote a religion. And while a religious group, a fundamentalist group, they want to impose their historical point of view on everybody else, and if you don't agree with it, you get your fingernails pulled out.
But Mr. Kaku, it's the same with democracies, and American democracy, I think, is a prime example here, because if you disagree with the American way of living a life, you face a very real danger of a war being pushed onto your country.
Let me ask you a question, right? In Afghanistan, did they harbor terrorists who wanted to do damage to the United States?
I don't know that.
Do nations...
Okay,
let me ask you a question now. On tape, let me ask you a question.
Absolutely.
Who was behind 9/11? Are you a conspiracy theorist?
Not
really. Are you these people that think that maybe George W. Bush toppled his own building? What do you think is behind 9/11? Let me ask you that question. Who was behind 9/11?
I think...
Let me ask you a question.
I heard
Who
your
was
question.
behind 9/11?
Mr. Kaku, I think...
Answer me a simple question. Who is behind 9/11? I give you the courtesy of being on your show. You should give me the courtesy of answering one simple question.
Well, okay,
Who is behind 9/11?
I do tend to believe in this conventional narrative of Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden being behind that tragic and horrendous attack. But the question is whether the death of those people justified hundreds of thousands of people who were killed afterwards. And I don't think the goals that were set out before that war were actually achieved during that war. And that's the biggest problem. You've been very critical of radical groups trying to impose that sort of that point of view, and I totally agree with you. But I think the way and the means that democracies employ are not much better.
I disagree. If you equate barbarism and religious fundamentalism with the principles of democracy, I think we've lost, if we accept your point of view, that there's some kind of moral equivalence between forces of darkness and ignorance and torture and persecution and the forces of democracy. I think we've lost.
As far as I'm concerned, there are a lot of people who, in this part of the world and many others, who truly believe in democratic ideals, and they're trying actually to, our countries are in transition. But the problem that I see in many of the established Western democracies is that people have grown used to taking those democratic ideals and democratic freedoms for granted, and they no longer challenge their own authorities and no longer subject their authorities to, all those tests that have actually been described in the writings of the American founding fathers.
Everything you've said can be summarized in one sentence. You feel that American democracy is not perfect. I agree. I'm not going to defend imperfect decisions by an imperfect democracy for positions I don't agree with. I just believe in the principle. The fact that these things were hashed out in the press, I know because I was part of the debate. I know how vigorous the debate was in Congress, in churches. People were debating whether or not we should go to war in the Middle East. And I think that's a testament to the health of the democratic process. And I think I have history on my side.
But I'm not asking you about electing a leader once every 4 years. It's not about that. Democracy is not just about going to the polls. I'm asking you...
That's the bottom line.
Well, I don't think it's the bottom line.
It comes down to the vote. When everything is said and done, it comes down to a vote.
But why does it have to be once every 4 years? Because the internet allows us, again, to have a vote on every single consequential issue. For example, the American president is considering arming the Syrian rebels. Why not to ask the American people whether they support that decision? The internet gives us that right.
After everything is said and done, you have to have rules for the vote. Representation of how many nations, how many people can vote for different kinds of candidates, and how long will they serve. If a president only serves for 6 months, you get chaos. If someone serves for 20 years, you get a dictatorship. You have to have a happy medium. The person should be given the benefit of the doubt that during that period of time, they can carry out policies that people believe in. That's why we don't have government by the internet. Government by the internet would be chaos, because every day a new poll is taken, and of course people are fickle.
That's a very interesting idea, but let's elaborate. To some extent, people appear on political ads, they try to spread their ideas, and if you look at the data...
There's a difference. The internet is instantaneous. This barrage of ideas coming at you all the time. A government by the internet would change every second. You don't like somebody, you vote them out. It would be madness, sheer madness to have a government by the internet.
But I wonder, why do we have to have those two extremes, electing a president once every 4 or 5 years
well, name me an alternative.
Well, for example, an alternative would be, again, when you have major decisions about the future of your country or the future of somebody else's country, actually, for that matter, ask the people. It doesn't have to be every single step that will be, decided by the internet voters, but you can have those polls once in a while when the decision is consequential.
I disagree, because sometimes the popular decision is the incorrect one. Sometimes you have to have a leader that's not short-sighted, just sees the polls day by day, but has the long-term point of view. We remember our leaders who were visionary precisely because they ignored the day-to-day, hour-by-hour feelings of the people around them.
Now,